Welcome everyone. This is the Africa We Want podcast, an Africa Aisha podcast. It's been a while since we had one, but it's very nice to be back. So today we'll be speaking about digital trade, and I'm Christine, and I'm with Chido. Chido will say hi. I will introduce her. She'll take up the discussion. But today, speaking on digital trade, it's the whole concept of buying and trading goods using digital means, using electronic means, so that there's no particular description or definition of what it is, but it's like online sales, it's e-commerce, it's e-payment systems, it's the offering of sale of goods and the offering of services on the digital platforms. So, and especially in light of COVID, so, as the COVID situation has gone on since 2020, this we are recording this in on 10th August 2021, and the COVID situation has been going on. People working from home, businesses going offline and going online because there's been a much higher increase in demand of things online than offline. So digital trade as which is like the selling and offering of goods and services online has picked up and it's really growing, and quite a bit that we can speak about. I'll give Chido the opportunity to just say hi and also start speaking to the discussion, and then we will flow with the discussion as it goes. Chido.
Thank you so much, Christine. It really feels so great to be back. We actually had a very long break and I was starting to miss this. But yeah, I'm so glad that we decided to open with a discussion that is very close to my heart, which is digital trade. The moment you start talking about anything digital and technology, I get very excited. So you have said already what like the basic form of trying to understand digital trade. And I think I would probably just want to mention that, well, so obviously this has been a concern or a conversation that had been going on internationally or regionally prior to 2019 December, when we then had the World Health Organization declaring COVID-19 a global pandemic. So the conversations even were and are still ongoing at the World Trade Organization, but mainly focused on e-commerce, right? Uh, but I think we didn't have a greater understanding of the impact of technology on trade and related issues until the time that we actually had the global pandemic, because you know how countries were putting in place lockdown measures and all these other related measures to try and curtail the spread of the virus, right? So because of that, people couldn't conduct businesses as usual, and businesses had to reinvent themselves. And as a result, we then started realizing the acceleration of digital trade, not only in first world countries, but even in Africa, right? So I always love this example of this Ugandan uh, community. So what they did was the government had to shut down the whole country, impose lockdowns and curfews, and minimize contact. And they had to come up with online mechanisms to make sure that groceries are sold and bought online. So they started having online butcheries, and they had an online payment system to make sure that all transactions basically they sort of uh, they happen online, right? And you have a lot of examples of buying and selling that was happening online. You talk of Jumia, which was recording the highest sales ever. You talk of your South African take a lot, because a lot of people were now buying online. I'll give you an example. I never used take a lot in my entire life, simply because I would prefer going to the store. But because of the pandemic and not being able to go to the mall, I started using take a lot, and I realized how much now I even continuously use Take a Lot, regardless of the fact that the lockdown restrictions have been relaxed. And that's just the e-commerce aspect. Even if you look at payment systems, a lot of online payment systems were further developed during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? I was actually realizing that in South Africa, there's now what they call the Times Bank, which is a purely online bank. It's a digital bank. You will never walk into any physical office. Whatever that they do is conducted purely online. So all this was trying to facilitate the exchange of goods and the payment systems, which obviously then accelerate the conversations that we now constantly have around digital trade and how to go about it, how to embrace it, tap into the digital economy and try to, to develop it further and benefit more from that.
Yeah, Chido, those are good comments. And actually, I was reading an OECD report on digitalization and especially taxation of the digital economy. And what they were saying is that a lot of businesses right now and consumers have gone online, so that the first point of call for most consumers right now is not to go to the store, to the physical store, is to go online. So, for instance, if I was looking for oil for my hair, what I do is that I go online and check first of all what's the price of this, and then and then if there's an option to have it delivered to me, I'll take that over going to a physical store. So increasingly, that's what has happened, and I think coming from a situation of what some of the implications of COVID, what has come out of it is this digital trade. And I think the other thing also to say is that for emerging markets, and that's especially within Africa, uh, there are countries where, like Amazon, for instance, in the US, it has been increasingly been leading and taking out like stores like Walmart. And now what that has been increasingly happening in like the US, within Africa, which are the emerging markets, online shopping has not, and e-commerce hasn't been like such a big thing until like the COVID pandemic set in. So you'll find, like, for instance, right now, this is now, as you say, like that's when you said you doing online shopping, and I would like buy food online and have it delivered. Well, so it means like there's an opening up of these markets within Africa. And like in Kenya, for instance, where I am right now, like most of the payment systems went from hard cash payment systems to like mobile money payment system or whatever form of online payment. And increasingly, those forms of payment systems are picking up. And so I think it's quite the discussion to have about digital trade, and anyone who is looking at how, which is the next horizon that I'm looking at for my business. I would say the digital trade side is really picking up, and the advantage about it is also the cost of it is not as much, because you don't need a physical store. You just literally just need a warehouse, where like what Jumia does, there are warehouses where you order something online, then it's delivered to you from the warehouse that's possibly closest to you, or you go pick it up. So there's little storage room that you require even as a business, because now you can just have people pick up whatever items they need from a warehouse. Or you can, it's different people, even merchants, who are selling on your e-market, so that you don't even need to have a warehouse yourself. It's just that the merchants need to like guarantee a delivery of the packages within a certain period of time from wherever they are located. So, so it's quite an interesting discussion to have. And as you listen to this, we'd like to hear what your thoughts are on the whole digital trade thing, and especially with the COVID situation. It's like one of the good things I would say that have come out of this, forcing people to go online. But then, Chid, also the thing to say is, internet access to internet is important, and even penetration of internet, and the price and the cost of it. Because even as if all businesses are going to go online, then it means that people need to be able to have the ability to access these systems. And especially with internet, it relies on the internet. It's unlike like mobile money payments, where like within Kenya you don't need internet to actually operate your mobile money. Same with Zimbabwe. But now when it comes to like e-commerce, you need internet. So that's the other thing, and that's the other reason why like the brick and mortar shops will keep operating, because someone walking along the road and they want to buy bread, you'd rather just buy it there instead of buying internet to access internet to make an order for delivery of bread. So that's the other thing, because sometimes even like the cost, especially when it's quite expensive to access internet. And in Kenya, for instance, if I would say that the prices of internet have recently gone up, because the government has introduced excise duty on internet. Oh, well, not introduced, but they have increased it. Previously, it was there, but now they have increased how much excise duty applies to internet. So again, like making the situation a bit more, yeah, complicated, especially on the cost of access to it. Should I don't know what other thoughts you have on the topic.
Okay, thank you so much. I remember when I attended the colloquium, and we're trying to come up with solutions to try and make sure that the pace at which the continent is developing when it comes to digital trade remains, like we continuously keep the momentum and we go a step further. We ended up having a conversation that was mainly focused on having um, digital trade zones, right? So, and I think I still maintain that one of the solutions that we actually need to put on table, and it sort of deals with all these other issues that you have already cited, right? So number one, you mentioned the problem of connectivity, access to the internet, and a lot of these other things that are centered around infrastructure, which basically is true. We lack the infrastructure as a continent to make sure that we support the digital economy. But we are not going to get to a point where we are going to say now we have the full infrastructure that we need, because usually with this with tech supporting infrastructure, there has to be a lot of investment, especially when you're looking at our continent. We have the largest concentrate of developing and least developed economies. So this is where technological hubs, trade zones start coming into play, right? So I'm going to start by giving you examples of what has happened. The first trade zone to ever be implemented or set up in the whole world was in Malaysia, the Malaysian Digital Trade Zone, which basically has got three pillars. It has got the e-hub, the e-satellites, and a functionality that supports SMSC growth. So most of the SMEs in Malaysia are registered on the online platform. You don't need so much complicated internet to do that. As long as you've got a smartphone, you are already on the map, right? And the zone itself has got a lot of initiatives that actually support SME growth. And if you look at the testimonials that actually come from it, you realize that most SMEs started tapping into regional markets, started tapping into a global market. They found themselves part of the global value chain because of the incentives that were coming as a result of the digital zone or as a result of being registered. Then you have the e-satellite or the e-technological hub, which basically is a pillar within the trade zone that calls for all foreign investment, particularly in respect of the technological infrastructure that supports a digital economy. And it is actually recorded that within the first 6 months of setting up that digital trade zone, there was a large influx of Chinese investment just trying to invest in the technological development. So it has thrived on investment. And because it operates as a small economic zone, but it's digital, it's more like it also has an e-marketplace. So you realize that all the investment that is coming is specifically channeled towards technological development, transfer of technology, and making sure that there is connectivity, not only for the traders, but even the consumers. So what's actually happening is it's a collaboration, right? It's just not the Malaysian government, it's just not the investors, but even the companies such as DHL, that that specialize in courier services are also part of that, and they make sure that even the delivery systems it's done at a lower rate. And because of that, we now have not China, Dubai coming with it's called Dubai Commercial City, right? Which basically is also modeled in terms of the Malaysian Digital Free Trade Area. It also has got restaurants because Dubai is a tourist destination. They have got a pillar within the same smart commercial city specifically focuses on tourism, and there is so much investment. All UAE investment is going there. So I think that the only way we are going to get to Silicon Valley or to where China is and be like Shenzhen or Hong Kong is when we start setting up the small hubs that actually attract investment. And this is not something that is foreign to the continent, right? If you look at the African Union digital transformation strategy, it actually talks of setting up, but they are called industrial that lead to investment, accelerated investment in respect of technology, make sure that there is connectivity, data is available, and all these other things. And then you've got Cometa trying to come up with a slightly similar initiative, but which is basically supposed to be a trade facilitation to the Comesa Digital Free Trade Area, which is underpinned already by technology. You're talking about blockchain technology. And I think it's a very good opportunity, especially for the SMEs within the region. So the point is, Christine, once we start having these initiatives, yes, we attract investment. Secondly, there are a lot of development partners, right? Developmental partners. We're talking about the ICC, we're talking about the World Customs Organization, World Bank. The World Bank actually has got a digital transformation strategy for Africa that is purely meant to be technical assistance to support the full implementation of the digital strategy. So if we make use of those opportunities, right, as far as trade facilitation and e-customs is concerned, we know that the World Customs Organization is constantly trying to be at the center of it. We have got an UNCTAD, right? All these other organizations, they are really willing to invest in in digital economy. So we need to then start, making use of those opportunities, set up these industrial parks, incubate the small businesses already that we have that are technological driven, so that we start, we end up doing what Malaysia has, or even a better version of it. Or we have Silicon Valley, right? We are able to do that, but we can't wait for a time where we say, okay, now data is available at less than $1 per 8 gig in the whole of Africa. So we now need to start. We can't do that because we're never going to get to that point.
Chido, and I think to say that we've had these discussions in the past, especially like on the Comesa Digital Free Trade Area and the East Africa Community Single Digital Market that this EAC is trying to develop. And I think, as you say, there are some things which are at the very basic. Like one of the big drivers of the digital economy is data. And data is something you can just collect. I mean, Google, everyone is collecting this data already. So, and then it's just that you need to figure how to monetize the data that you're collecting. And if it's what people are doing already, there's data that's existing that you can use for these trade zones. And but also key is like on the regulatory part, which there needs to be proper regulation, and we will have the discussion on like regulatory sandboxes, especially when it comes to like the digital side, and that's the whole idea of almost like having a trial phase that allows businesses to try without much regulation, because within Africa, especially, I would say regulation, having the wrong regulation is just at the very basic part of killing digital businesses. So we've had the discussion about business incubators, but also the regulation itself, to just have, even if it's like the tax regulation that nurtures more of these digital businesses, other than try and the minute Jumia or someone or Takealot is trying to make a little profit, the tax person is the government is trying to tax our business until it can't exist anymore. So I would say the regulatory part also is a good starting point to think about, and we've had discussions where we've exchanged ideas of, like, for instance, if it's like even the cryptocurrencies, other than past regulation banning cryptocurrency, like test and see how this work in a market like maybe Zim. See how would cryptocurrency work to support the trade side of things. How would blockchain work? Like making payments on the payment side within like Comesa, but then so that Comesa adopts it, the countries themselves, each individual country needs to be progressive enough to allow some of these systems, because there's no way, for instance, like Uganda is banning use of, let's say, a certain kind of system, while Comesa is trying to implement the same thing. There's no way Kenya could be trying to tax, like extremely tax on digital businesses to the point where they can't exist anymore. While at the same time, EAC is saying that they're trying to come up with a single digital market. I mean, it needs to start even before it goes to the regional levels. Like the countries themselves, they need to have progressive legislation and regulation and legislation for these things, because without it, and especially when it comes to banning of certain kinds of payment systems, for instance, while at the same time the region is trying to push for them, it just is inconsistent. So that's what I would add to the discussion, Chido. And I think we'll just have a short discussion today. So if you could make your closing remarks, but then we will have a discussion in the future, especially to give more detail and cover more about like what would a digital free trade zone look like, because most people, or hopefully people, have an idea of what like a free trade zone looks like right now, where governments, like in Kenya, you set the setup of special economic zones, so that if you invest within the special economic zones, you get certain advantages. So easier licensing and easier maybe tax holidays. So essentially what a trade zone does is that it gives you like easier regulation if you're within the zone. But then the idea is to encourage investment, and then but then it's regulated. But Chido, I think we will have a bit more of discussions to speak about like Dubai, which you mentioned, and see how that works, and Malaysia as well. But if you could give your closing remarks for today, then we call it a discussion.
Thank you so much, Christine. You raised a lot of issues that I would like. If I start talking about them, it's not going to end. You spoke about data, the importance of data within the digital economy, and obviously my conversation would want to go at length to talk about data sovereignty, data localization, particularly what China is doing, and how it could probably work for the continent. But again, like you said, we're going to have another discussion where we're going to talk about these things. And then when you look at the regulatory aspect of it, the the unfortunate thing is the digital economy in its entirety, right? It requires different approaches to regulation. So if you start talking about regulatory sandboxes, the first thing that comes to my mind is they make more sense when you're talking about payment systems. So basically for the regulation of fintechs, right? But now when you're looking at it from the perspective of digital trade, looking at the trade rules, the international trade rules, it's not feasible to have regulatory sandboxes because uh, the rules of trade, in a way, they are a bit complicated, right? So you still need to come up with MFN principles. You still need to come up with national treatment principles, market access, all these other things. How do we deal with bundled goods, right? How do we deal with goods that are both goods and services? Because now they are part of digital trade. But I'm so excited because the African Continental Free Trade Area, right? One of its protocols which will be negotiated at the next phase will be a protocol on. Initially, it was supposed to be a protocol on e-commerce, but because of the changes that have been happening as a result of COVID, they are now told to actually change it to a protocol on digital trade, mainly because e-commerce is just but a branch or a facet of digital trade, but it actually is not digital trade. Digital trade has a lot, right? So I'm so ecstatic in the sense that I'm thinking that if we manage to negotiate an instrument for the regulation of digital trade within the African Continental Free Trade Area, that would be number one, a pace setter for the whole world, because currently we do not have a document at multilateral level that actually speaks to either e-commerce or digital trade. So all the other that we might try to borrow or look at, they exist at bilateral level or plurilateral level, right? So obviously now it becomes a pace setter, and for the first time, this is something that we are going to and make a model that actually works for Africa and African businesses. And then secondly, I think it's going to be good in the sense that the longer we continue trading digitally but without uniform rules that actually regulate them, the more we start having the gray areas and the disputes and all the problems that arise. Like, for instance, just to pick the listeners' minds, let's talk about so we've got the protocol trade services, which in some cases can be said to be technological neutral, especially when you're looking at services like consumer abroad, like the modes of delivery. It's technical, but let's talk about smart products, right? You have got a product that is both a trade and a service simply because of how it has been made, right? This is a radio that has been manufactured through 3D printing. What do you make of it? So when you are when you are importing it, because when you start talking about trade, it stops being about me going to buy bread at the local market, but it also starts talking about the manufacturer, the baker, the where they get the raw materials, the farmer who produced the wheat, who probably is in Bangladesh, right? So now, if I am to sell or import or rather export these radios, like I said, that I have sort of manufactured through 3D printing. The question is, internationally, which rule is going to apply, right? When we're now talking about MFN principles, how exactly are we going to be looking at the MFN principles? How are we going to look at market access? Is it a good? Is it a service? So that it becomes very important that at a time like this, we actually do have, uniform rules that regulate trade. And I'm hoping that, these rules would all equally be, applicable to digital trade zones and areas that are obviously going to proliferate as time goes on. But like I said, if I talk about this, we might spend the whole night. So for now, I'm going to stop here and hope for the next time that we actually have a conversation around this.
Chido, what you say is so exciting. I was actually starting to get so excited, especially when you were speaking about the MFN principles and thinking through these things and how Africa, continental free trade area, and the protocol is just going to have common regulations across Africa, and it's really exciting, quite an exciting topic. And I think we'll just have a bit more of it. Thank you everyone for listening tonight, and you can leave us your comments and your thoughts, and we'll carry on with the discussions. You can suggest any other areas that we can cover. We are happy to speak more about them, and you can read more about the things that we refer to. Also, check our website. We will post some of these materials or something find to follow up on it. Our website is 54ishare.com, and you can follow us on social media. Chido, thank you very much for always being part of this. It's a great, great pleasure. And thank you everyone for listening tonight. Thank you.